Hey, hi, hello friends. Welcome on in. My name is Shannon and today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in February. We might also get into a little bit of my March TBR because it is kind of short right now. So as you guys can see, the pile of books right here, these are all the books that I read in February and we're going to talk about all of them. So the first book that I want to talk about is A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is the third book in the Caard series and this is the first book that I read in February. I read a lot of these books on my Kindle because I was traveling this month, so naturally I got to read a little bit more. So all the books you guys just saw, this is not normally how much I read. I will normally get through like maybe 1 or 2 books in a month. Sometimes I can do a third. It really depends. But these, as you can see, are some pretty hefty books. I will say, compared to the other Caard books, this one was really good. I wouldn't say it was my favorite. Personally, I really liked book 1 and book 2 more. Book 3 just kind of felt like it wrapped it all up. I didn't realize this, but I looked it up, or I watched like a video where somebody else talked about it, but apparently Caard was originally just supposed to be a trilogy. So it kind of makes sense that this one kind of felt like everything got wrapped up. But I did really enjoy the story. I will say that this book in particular, I think is one of the biggest ones in the series, is very war heavy. It talks a lot about a battle and things like that. I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, but it is war heavy, battle heavy, and there's just like a lot of stuff happening. There is still some romance in this plot. I mean, that's kind of like the main thing for these books, but this one in particular go into the romance as much as book 2 and book 1 did. But personally, I still think it was a great book and would still very much recommend this to anyone who wants to read it, but I can easily see why people fall off after this book. The next book that I read in February is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is the hardcover version. I do not have the dust jacket for this. I purchased this off of Facebook Marketplace and the person didn't have it. This is just a little novella. This is technically book 3.5 in the Caard series. I could have done without this book. A lot of people say that this feels like the holiday special. It's just a continuation of the story. It's just kind of like a little like Christmas special, I guess. Like they are kind of all centered around this one holiday that's coming up and you can kind of see like where are they now, what are they doing, and so this just kind of felt more like a where are they now type book, again mixed with the holiday special. Didn't really add much to the story. I will say the thing that was kind of hard about this book is that every single chapter, pretty much every chapter, it switched POVs. So coming from the first 3 books where you're mainly sitting in Pharaoh's point of view and suddenly you're flipping to all these other characters that were introduced in those books, it's kind of confusing, it's kind of annoying, and sometimes the POV switches mid-chapter and there is a break so you can like see when it switches, but again it's very annoying when the first 3 books you were focusing mainly on Pharaoh and suddenly
you're looking at Cassian, Azriel, Elaine, Nesta, Rhysand, I don't even know Tamlin's even in this one. I can't remember.
If you're going to read this book, there are some things that are important for the next one. I'm holding this upside down and I know that. There are a few things in this book that foreshadow stuff that's going to happen here, or they have a tie-in to this book. If you are going to continue the series, you definitely need to read this. Again, there's just like a few minor things that pop up that'll be important, but still I didn't care much for it and it was obviously a very quick read.
That was a nice lead-in to this book.
But naturally, the next book I read is A Court of Silver Flames. If you guys are aware of the series, again, I'm not going to give spoilers. This focuses on Nesta's POV. It follows her story and what's going on with her. A lot of people do not care about Nesta. Personally, I still don't care about Nesta after finishing this book. It's also a very big book. I don't know, I'm still very conflicted on this. I don't feel like this fit with the rest of the series. And again, it could just be because it is Nesta's POV. You can tell that the first 3 books were meant to be together because the writing style is very similar across the 3 books. I mean, the author did get a lot better. So the first 3 books in the series are very cohesive, and A Court of Frost and Starlight, it's just kind of there. And then this kind of feels like the beginning of like a new trilogy that's kind of like a spin-off of the original Caard, because you're never gonna get Pharaoh's point of view again. I believe that's like what the author has said. While I would love to see where the characters are, where they go, I'm not as invested after reading this book. But I didn't feel like I connected with Nesta. I felt like there was just so much happening and it was just a drag. When I say there was a lot happening, there also really wasn't a lot happening. It was just her
running around doing her daily stuff, and that's really it.
It was just like plot, a lot of nothing, and then more plot. I do want to say, like with the full Caard series, I am going to do like another video and kind of explain more about this series and like my full thoughts on every single book. If you guys are part of my Discord, then you guys know that this was the Discord pick for the book club this month, and you guys chose A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and technically this is classified as a young adult thriller.
I had an entire Twitch stream where I talked about this and my thoughts on it.
Personally, I think that this is is more of a teen read. The main character is about 17 years old, and she's essentially a high school senior who is reinvestigating a murder case that happened in her hometown 5 years ago. And she partners up with one of the victims slash potential murderer's brother. So basically there's Pip and then there's Sal, who is accused of murdering Andy, and Sal has a brother named Ravi who Pip and Ravi team up together to try and solve the murder and prove that Sal is innocent or not. It was a little too juvenile for me. The main character is very much Gen Z, and I didn't love that. It kind of weirded me out. And then on top of that, one of my mods and I realized when we were reading this book and like typing in our Discord chat, there's a UK version and there's a US version. So they have like the localization, there's like different versions depending on where you live. Apparently the UK version is the OG because the author, I believe, lives in London, and she released it there first. That version has a slightly different text than what we have here. So apparently with the UK and the US version, the author decided, or maybe the publishers decided to, if you're in the UK and you got the UK version, the book is set in the UK. If you're in the US, it's set in a fictional town in Connecticut. It also sounds like in the US version, they got rid of some of the language that Pip uses, and they kind of got rid of some of like her internal thoughts, which in my opinion, after reading some of those passages that my mod sent me, those passages and things give Pip more personality that I think we're missing in this US version. So I'm not a fan of the localization that happened with this. I also felt like a lot of the things that Pip did is not realistic for our US court system. I feel like the ways that she obtained evidence for her case was illegal and would not be admissible evidence in a legal US court system. Before someone comes for me and says something, the book is set in present day times. It's set in the US, it's set in the UK, it's set in like a realistic time and place. I know that it's fiction, but kind of like what I had to say about the other book that I read last year called The Perfect Marriage, I feel like some authors need to do a little bit more research on court system and legal systems if they're going to write a thriller that involves that. My brain thinks too realistically, and so while I was reading this, I'm just like, that would not fly. She could not do that. And she constantly violated the terms of her capstone project with her teacher. Her teacher literally said, you can't do this, and you can't cross ethical lines. She crossed every single ethical line that she could, and somehow she got away with it and still passed her classes, which is amazing to me. Like, I don't know any teacher that would allow that. Like, she literally jeopardized her safety. We had a whole discussion about this on my Twitch stream. I'm glad we picked it because it was an easy read for our first book club book ever, but I didn't love it, didn't really like it, didn't enjoy it. I kind of forced my way through it, and I will not be continuing this series. In my last video and in this video, I mentioned that we have a Discord book club. We have recently decided to switch it over to the Fable app, and that's what we're going to be using from now on. We're just kind of testing it out for the month of March to see if that's going to be a better platform than Discord. I know Discord's a bit hard for people to use and not everybody uses it. So we're trying to use a different platform. I'm going to have the link down below in the video description box. And then the fifth book that I read in February is Iron Widow by shannon.jaws. I was anticipating this book for so long, and I have followed this author for years. I talked about this in my last video, but I didn't know much about this book going into it. After reading it, I'm still a little confused on how I feel about it, but I did still think it was a really great read, although I was a little disappointed in the author. After seeing their content on the internet for years, I was expecting a lot more out of this book. One of the main themes of this book is feminism, and I felt like the author could have done a better job of that. There were a lot of instances actually where the main character was like,
oh, I'm just a girl, I can't do that, right?
Or
because I'm a girl, I can't do this. Like,
it just didn't feel realistic based on the writing of this author and how they have advocated for feminism, how political they have been on the internet and their other content creation. I was expecting more out of that, and I feel like there was definitely a better way to make feminism your main theme without making it so obvious and kind of childish, I guess, especially when like your main characters are supposed to be like, I think they're about 17, 18 years old. I think they're actually 18. I will say that there is a little bit of an LGBTQIA+ romance situation that's happening in this book. The romance is very, very light. I need you people to remember that, because there are a lot of people who watch my videos who might read just like me and like a lot of romance and fantasy. This is fantasy.
There's a little bit of romance. It's like a little teeny tiny baby drop.
It is very war heavy. It is a lot of world building, and I would say it took me a good chunk of this book before I finally got into it. And even then, I still wasn't fully into it because I do love my fantasy romance, and because it didn't have a lot of that, it was not great for me. I just felt myself struggling through most of the book because I just couldn't understand what was happening. I was trying to figure out all the terms. It took a hot minute. So I was a little disappointed by this one, but overall I did still enjoy the book and I would still recommend it to people. I just think that some of my friends may have overhyped the book. For me personally, again, I was expecting more out of this author and I was a little disappointed. The author is coming out with a second book, I believe in December of 2024. I do intend to read that second book and get a copy of it as well. My husband is going to read this. I'll let you guys know what hubby thinks because I'm forcing my husband to get into books as well. And now we're going to talk about the last two books that I read in February. Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I have been eyeing this book for a few months now and I finally got my hands on a copy of it. I love this book. This was my first 5-star read of the year. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people, you either love it or you hate it. It was a young adult fantasy, I would say romance. It is pretty heavy on the romance. Basically, the title tells you everything you need to know. It's about the daughter of the Moon Goddess. It follows the daughter of, I'm going to say it wrong, Chang'e. I always say it wrong. There's a whole backstory. There's a little Chinese mythology about the Moon Goddess, and this is following her daughter. That's really all it is. The Moon Goddess doesn't have much of anything to do with this book, except that she's the mother of the main character. Our main character, there is a love triangle that happens, and there is a little bit of war, a little bit of battle, but it's not war heavy. It's not meant to be war heavy. It's meant to be a very light read. I don't know how else to explain it. Light, whimsical. It's very descriptive of your setting. Yeah, that's kind of really it. It's like just like a light little romance. Again, I've seen a lot of mixed reviews. I personally really liked it. I thought that the author did an amazing job with this book and I was super excited to pick up the rest of this series. Which leads me to the second book in the series, which is Heart of the Sun Warrior. This is the second book in the Celestial Kingdom series. There is a third book. I did do some deep diving on the internet. The author is coming out with a third book officially in the series. She hasn't officially announced it yet, and there is technically a book 2.5 which comes after this one, and it's basically like a novella and it has a bunch of short stories that happen before, during, and after these two books. I guess I'm going to want to read that before I move on to the third book. Again, sorry if you hear pounding. We have people working on stuff in our garage. I was really curious as to what the author was going to do. Basically, at the end of this book, there were some things that happened at the end that were not a cliffhanger, but it left it very open. It's like, hey, here's some stuff. It's kind of resolved, and we could leave it as is, or we could continue it. And I think if you just read this book, I personally don't think you need to continue the series because this book felt like a little bit of a letdown to me. I still really enjoyed it, and I was really looking forward to what the plot was going to be, and I did still think it was interesting, and I did think that the author gave people more of what they wanted, and this was a little bit heavier on the battles and the war and fighting. I think the only thing that's going on is really just the unsolved love triangle, which is kind of solved but also kind of not. It's confusing. But I'm also including this book in this video because I technically finished it yesterday, which was March 1st. I did read the majority of this in February. I literally had a few chapters that I finished yesterday. I'm counting this in my February reads. And then to finish out today's video, we're going to talk about some of the books that are my March TBR. I'm not making a huge TBR for March because I don't know how much I'm going to be able to read. I am doing one more trip. I'm going to be traveling at least one more time, and I'm probably not going to be reading as much there. Here is the TBR. The first book that I'm planning to read is called To Bleed a Kingdom. I did start this yesterday. I'm very fortunate that I got an advanced reader copy. It is my first arc ever, and thank you Nerd Fam for gifting this to me. This is my first arc. The book is actually going to be released on March 26th of this month, and so yeah, I'm reading it and I'm going to review it here on my channel. I'm really excited for you guys to check this out. So far, I am going to give you guys the heads up. This is a dark fantasy romance. When I say dark, there are a lot of content warnings for this book, and if you are not somebody who can handle that or somebody who is dealing with trauma from that, please do not pick up this book. This is a new and upcoming author. I believe this is Ella Dawes' first book that she's releasing. It is her debut novel, and I'm only a few chapters in, but I will say so far it is amazing. All of the content warnings, they are thrown at you in the prologue of this book. Please, please, please be very aware of that. The second book that I'm going to be reading in March is called Powerless by Lauren Roberts. You guys have probably seen this all over Book Talk, BookTube, whatever. This is a very popular fantasy book. I believe it's another fantasy romance. I think it is. So we're following Peyton and Kai. She's basically an ordinary, she's powerless, and you're following Kai, who is a prince and he's an elite. And in this universe, if you're ordinary, you don't deserve to live. That's how this book goes. And we're really excited to read this. We are going to be reading this on the Fable app. Again, all that stuff is linked down below. This is one of the main books that I have to get to next month. And obviously because last month I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess and then the second book in that series, I am going to be picking up Tales of the Celestial Kingdom. I do already have that on my Kindle. Again, it's short stories that happen before, during, and after those two books. And then the next book that I plan to read, which I don't have yet, but I'm hoping to get it soon from my local library, is The 7-Year Slip. I have seen this all over Book Talk and people have been talking about it and raving about how amazing it is. I'm really excited to give it a shot as well. As you guys know, I do love little romances, so hopefully this is good. And then if I have a little bit of extra time, I would like to get to A Touch of Darkness. I picked this up from a local bookshop a few weeks ago and it's a little romance. I believe it's like another retelling of Persephone and Hades and like their whole like love story. I'm interested to see what this is like, and I do know there are other books in the series. I don't remember if it follows the same characters or if it moves on to other Greek mythological romances. I'll check this out. I'll review it for you guys, let you guys know how I feel about it, and yeah. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. As you guys know, I am doing a lot of book content right now because I'm really enjoying reading and I love sharing it with you guys. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I'm trying to work on giving you guys a better description of the books as I'm reading them or as I'm talking about what's on my TBR, because I do know that one of the last videos I posted, I basically said like,
oh my gosh, I'm gonna read all these books, but I'm not gonna give you guys a synopsis. I'm not gonna tell you what they're about because I don't really know what they're about.
And generally I like to go into books blind, not knowing what I'm gonna get myself into, because if I have a certain expectation, I find that I don't enjoy the book as much sometimes because I've read about it online, I've like read other people's comments and reviews, and it just kind of ruins my experience. I'm gonna try to be better about it, I promise you guys. And don't forget to join our book club on Fable. You can also join the Discord as well, but I'm still active in the Discord and I hang out there, and I do stream on Twitch every Tuesday and Friday. But if you made it this far in the video, comment with a butterfly down below
just to confuse everybody else.
But thank you again so much for hanging out, and I'll see you guys soon.